There's lots of talk about psychedelics these days. You've all heard of the tremendous impacts of psychedelics and probably have lots of questions about these substances. Questions like where to start, what's legal, how to be safe, what medicine is right for me. Well, in today's episode, I ask these questions and many more of my friend Austin Mao. Austin is an accomplished entrepreneur who moved out of tech and real estate and founded an entheogenic church, Ceremonia, a few years ago here in Colorado. As you will learn, Austin's mission is to use these tools to help people to transform and heal so they reach their maximum potential in all areas of their lives. If you're curious about psychedelics and want to learn more, you're going to love this episode of the Conscious Entrepreneur podcast. Thanks for being here. Hey, Austin Mao, welcome to the Conscious Entrepreneur. It's great to see you.
So good to be with you, Alex.
Now, on this show, I interview a lot of founders. For the most part, they're founders of tech companies, marketing agencies, coaching companies. You're the first person I've talked to who is the founder of an entheogenic church here in Colorado. Tell me what that's all about and what your motivation was for leaving behind your life and deciding that this was going to be your calling.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. So I'm the co-founder of a psychedelic church called Ceremonia. And Ceremonia, it facilitates an integrated model of psychology to spirituality, of science and shamanism here halfway between Denver and Boulder. And I love being with you here because you've been such a big supporter and joined us as an quote unquote early adopter to two of our journeys. So every time I share space with you, I also feel lit up. I was a founder many times over. In fact, right out of college, I was made partner in a financial brokerage. And then by the time I founded Ceremonia, I've already started 5 other companies. And so I've been in tech, including being a CTO and a head of product. I've made apps, I've been in VR, etc. And then after that, I moved to real estate. So I used to have one of the largest Airbnb operating companies in the United States, and we were the largest operator in Las Vegas, the most touristed city in the world. And so, and one of my claims to fame as an entrepreneur in the past was I was really good at not working. So I had a 4-hour work week where I was making a very high 6-figure income, traveling the world with my wife, etc., and living what I used to call it Instagram life. What happened was in 2020, I was invited to an ayahuasca retreat for founders. Ayahuasca is a powerful plant medicine psychedelic. At that time, it was in Mexico. And I was invited by our mutual friend, Keith Ferrazzi, who wrote a famous book called Never Eat Alone.
Yep.
And when I went there, I thought it was a networking opportunity. You know, hey, here, I'm going to go to the jungle and do psychedelics with 50 other founders. Sign me up.
And
but
do some networking, see who I can meet.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
Right.
that was my frame of mind back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I also went in with a chip on my shoulder because I had gone to Burning Man for 8 years and I had done psychedelics recreationally more than 100 times. But what that experience was so profound and so surprising to me that it forever altered the course of my life in an extraordinarily positive way. On the first ceremony, which is a setting where we do a group, you know, psychedelic experience, but have a very solo inwards journey, I felt I had a vision of being held by my mother in a way where I felt unconditionally loved to an extent that I had completely forgotten about. My father had passed about 4 years prior to that, and I had a conversation with him under the psychedelic, introducing to him my wife. And I didn't know that I was missing that. You know, I thought I had already properly grieved him, but there was still, you know, so much of my life that I was living that I couldn't share with him. So I concluded that evening with a level of catharsis that was was like, man, I'm good. I'm ready to go home. This was amazing. But on the second night, I um, I was able to revisit an early traumatic experience that I shared on stage at Conscious Entrepreneur Summit, um, that I had completely repressed. And in the repressing of that memory, I had repressed all memory. So I couldn't remember my childhood very much. It was all blur and it was a gray fog. But after that experience, I woke up with tears in my eyes, and I said I felt like I was cured of Alzheimer's.
Mm.
Like I could remember my past, which enabled me to really live into the present. I started writing again. I wrote a poem that I share on stage now called Thank You, and I hadn't written in 13 years. Now writing is my number one passion in life. I started playing music, I started being in service, and and I completely altered the way that I live. Instead of running around the planet chasing after experience, I started devoting myself to inner healing work. What's really interesting as an entrepreneur is that it made me so much better of a founder. I literally doubled the revenue of my company in 3 months' time after that. And it came from a renewed passion, a renewed focus, a renewed clarity in which I could live my life. So this journey that I took from being a founder to being in service to founders, right, comes from my own history, my own embodiment, to be able to share what's possible, right? I don't invite founders to quit what they're doing and you know start having dreadlocks and lighting sage around their home. That's not the path. It's to actually get clarity around our gifts, get clarity around why we do what we do, because so much of what we do comes from a place of wound. You know, I've now facilitated over 400 founders, over 100 in through the Ceremonia program, and I've worked with billionaires, right, that are still killing themselves working. Like they and their future generations don't have to work at all, right? And yet they're still killing themselves. And there's this moment that happens in the course of a retreat, in the course of a ceremony, where there's an aha of like, this is why I do what I do. And often it's because it's like we're looking externally to fill that void internally. And when we're able to like switch that circuit and instead do it from a place um, of projecting our inner truth and our inner power out to the world in service to others, the amount of energy that comes from that is um, is what I like to share at the level of inspiration, right? Instead of at the level of force, trying to like work harder and stress more and push the extra mile. Like every founder has felt that initial call of inspiration. That's like, man, I can't wait to wake up, right? I can't wait to wake up because I'm just so excited
Yeah.
to do what I love doing. And so like getting that back is such a beautiful gift.
Well, it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is that you, in your previous iterations of working at a brokerage and managing all these Airbnbs and like living this Instagram life, you had a lot of energy, but it was going to a place that maybe it wasn't the true Austin Mao. It wasn't like your real self that was wanting that energy and that was doing that. You were sort of doing what you thought you were meant to be doing, and like, hey, I'm living this life, and let me just go do all these things that I see people doing and hear them talking about. You then go on this retreat, you had this experience, you're uncovering things that you weren't previously aware of, which cracks open an entirely new experience of your life. And within that, a whole different energy source that comes out of you. And so you change your perspective. It sounds like you're also then changing your identity as well. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, totally. Um, I can give you a very specific example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, I I was in a ceremony just after coming back from Spain, right, where I was in San Sebastian, where I was eating Michelin-starred restaurants, eating a ton of foie gras. Then I flew directly to Costa Rica for this retreat that I was facilitating at. And under the medicine, I was asking myself, like, why am I so exhausted? Why am I exhausting myself? Right? And it became clear to me that as a kid, I had moved about 4 times before I was 10 years old. And my parents divorced when I was a year and a half old. And so I was constantly running away from life, in a sense. And I was afraid of committing to something because if I committed to my quote unquote purpose and then I failed at that thing, then I would be worthless. I would be a failure, right? And so rather than commit to something, instead I just lived a more hedonistic life, right? After that ceremony, I said to myself, I'm going to make a commitment. And I was nomadic for almost 6 years, like working on my laptop on beaches and in resorts and things like that, right? That's when I actually moved to Denver.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I ultimately found you and started creating Ceremonia and started committing my life to the psychedelic movement and to this path of spirituality. And so just consider, like, if I didn't have that experience, I might still be running around the planet, again, looking great on Instagram, but not fulfilled, not purposeful, not inspired, and not creating, not actually giving back to the world. And that was just one ceremony, you know?
Well, single ceremonies can have that level of impact. For a lot of people, the issue is, I know I want to change. I know I want to be different. I know I want to go differently through the world. And you can have a single experience that totally reframes your thoughts. And what you realize is, hey, I'm carrying around a lot of old bullshit from my past or my family or my conditioning or society or, whatever stories I've been believing. And these are tools that you can really use to just like cut straight through those. And I think that's a big part of why there's so much conversation these days about the power of psychedelics. And I know that everyone calls it medicine for a good reason. The power of these tools to help you reframe and to reshape who you are. And I think that's a big part of why there's so much interest and so much activity around this right now.
Totally. You know, one trait of founders is they look for that direct path, right? The most efficient way, the most accelerated way to scale. Well, here we're scaling consciousness. We're scaling ourselves, right? I equate this work to 10 years of therapy in 10 hours. Um, and what people are able to experience in the course of just 5 days here is 96% say it's the most transformative experience of their lives,
Mm-hmm.
right? People demark who they are before and after this. And it's completely unpredictable, right? It's predictable, the transformation, but you could not actually fathom or imagine who you could become afterwards because that's been hidden from sight. And this work is about creating the inner sight to discover and meet yourself in a capacity, in a beingness that you never have before. Yeah.
And it's so applicable to founders in so many ways. So, you said founders are always going to take the straight path. Yeah, of course, we're going to find the most efficient, effective way to get where we're going, which is a really positive trait in founders. One of the other traits in founders is we tend to be really stuck in our heads, right? So we absorb a lot of information, and everyone always prizes entrepreneurs on being smart and seeing the future before everybody else does, and all this stuff. As a result, we live in our heads. And a
Yeah.
big part of the work of psychedelics is to say, hey, what about everything below the neck, right? And how do we get into the body? And I know that a big part of what you do at Ceremonia is supporting the experience through a whole lot of other modalities. And so Ceremonia and your approach, if I can summarize, is not just, hey, let's go do a ceremony and I'll lay down on mats for 6 or 7 hours or whatever it is. It's much more, hey, let's support ourselves. Let's support everyone through the entire journey. And so that involves prep, and it involves, maybe some coaching. It involves some movement, and it involves some somatic work. It involves some introspection, and then the ceremony itself. And then, of course, a lot of integration on the other side. And so the way that I think about it is, founders are these like really energetic, like hyperactive problem solver type of people. who tend to all be in the minds. And if I can start to shift to take more advantage of the energy that's in my body and to heal what's in my body, then I'm just increasing the amount of potential that I have. At least that's how I see the work that's going on here.
Yeah, totally. We say in this work, like the furthest distance that you'll travel in your life is the 18 inches from your mind to your heart, you know? and what you're speaking to are the outcomes, the effects, the benefits towards where we apply our life to work, right? And to things that we create and the people that we support in our lives. But really what's happening is that we are in this process bringing forth a quality of ourselves that is more pure, more powerful, and more capable than ever before. And that penetrates all aspects of life. In the very beginning of our preparation work, we have people rate themselves on the wheel of life, 8 spokes. Like Tony Robbins uses this too, right? Health and vitality, career and impact, meaning and relationships, so on and so forth, right? And then we do a retrospective after this, right? And like after the 8-week program, and look at like where do they rate themselves on this on each level. And universally on each level, there's a tremendous improvement. Now, in 8 weeks' time, people are not necessarily like making gargantuan shifts in the actual day-to-day of their life. But what they are absolutely shifting is how they relate to the external stimuli, right? Like something that would normally cause a person to get pissed off or frustrated or beat themselves up, they could then just sit with it, take a breath, and use that challenge as an opportunity to go deeper within, right? So they're able to meet their life, the external circumstances, the relationships, and the work they contribute to with so much more of themselves.
I want to go a lot deeper into the art and science of psychedelics. And before we do that, I want to ask you a question that I'm sure is on a lot of people's minds, which is, how did you actually go through the mechanics of setting up a psychedelic church? So there's so much gray area, we'll call it, on this. There's so much movement around psychedelics. There's a lot of differing interpretations of what is okay, what is legal, what is not legal, what is, sort of okay. And you're someone, you're showing up, you're doing this. You have already built companies. You know the process. You're not doing this flying by the seat of your pants. You're being very, very conscientious and very careful in the process. But I'm curious, like, what are the mechanics of doing this and doing it in a way that you can then offer what you're offering to the world via Ceremonia?
Yeah, thank you for naming that. As a psychedelic church, we serve the sacraments of psilocybin and ayahuasca as the Catholic Church would serve wine, right? And these sacraments help us connect to divinity or God or spirit or whatever you want to call it. I share that, in the context of our church, that when we use a word like God, that might invoke a different visual image for each person, right? A different identity. It could be a bearded white man in the clouds. It could be a fat smiling Buddha. It could be so many different things, right? But if we connect to the feeling underneath the idea and the energy underneath the feeling, that is shared amongst everybody, which is to say something that's ineffable, a higher power, universal. Often words like oneness and wholeness are used, right? Great levels of peace and joy and harmony. So in our church, to set up a church is, well, like any kind of entity, you would file to the state and to the federal government. But what's critical is to create a religion that's a bona fide religion. And so in our religion, our religious beliefs are summed up in 7 tenets, and this is shared on our website. The key ones are that truth is subjective, right? Like what we perceive and feels true to us. Truth is also objective. that when we get to the higher states of consciousness, like when we let go of our anger and our fear and whatnot, and we get into levels of peace and unconditional love, we start to see that the thread around everything is love, is an quality of isness and beauty and glory that surrounds everything. And that when we accelerate ourselves to this level of connection with the outside and inside, we actually connect with the inherent divinity that's inside. In Hinduism, it's called Atman. And then that connects us to the divinity in all things, which is called Brahman. And I use a word like divinity, and that might invoke a different idea. But really what I am wanting to share with people is it's a feeling. It's a feeling of the deepest intimacy with yourself. And as you are that intimate with yourself and you're looking at a tree or looking at a bird or looking at someone's eyes, you're feeling that same quality in them. You're experiencing that same quality in them. And the sacraments of psilocybin mushrooms and ayahuasca that have been around for tens of thousands of years and used in sacred contexts for thousands of years and many generations, those help us accelerate that communion with the divine, right? As I remember you experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, this is, this is, as you said before, there are certain days in life, and for me, I do have very, very strong pinpointed back to April 3rd with you in ceremony to say there is a shift that took place in me. There is a completely different outlook on life as a result of this, and it is around divinity, and it is around love, and it is super transformative in my life, right? And so this is part of why I want to have this conversation. And I mean, I don't mean that, hey, we want to recruit a bunch of people to do this. What I want to do is share a story so that we can say, hey, these are tools that are available for people. There are things that are out there for folks. And this is actually leading me to another question, which is, so we live in Colorado where there's been a lot of change recently. And so I could, if I wanted to, I could do a DIY version of what you're talking about. I can just go find somewhere some magic mushrooms, or I could go find some other substance, MDMA, whatever it is, and I can kind of take it and recreationally take it, or set it up in my house as a ceremony and or do a kind of a therapeutic setting. But what's the difference in your mind for someone who's trying to do this on their own versus I'm going through a program and I'm doing something with a group like Ceremonia? Like, what are the trade-offs? What are the pros and cons? What are the benefits of one approach or the other?
Yeah, there's this is a really often presented question, right? Like literally you can grow mushrooms in your backyard, and you can now do that legally in Colorado. And then you can sit on a couch, put on a playlist, and then take mushrooms on your own. Totally. And the cost of doing that is probably, I don't know, less than $50 that you can do. So why go to a retreat? Why do coaching, etc.? So first, I think I'd start with a metaphor. Like if you were going to do a life-changing surgery or a life-saving surgery, right? Would you go to a friend and do that? Or would you do that on yourself?
Right.
You
No.
probably wouldn't. um, and that's because the impact is so extraordinary, as well as the potential negative impact is so extraordinary that you would want the safest and best possible environment and conditions to do it, right? That's what this is. Now, the impact here is on 4 levels. It's mental, it's physical, it's spiritual, and it's relational. Okay? Mental, recent research done by Johns Hopkins, Imperial College of London, Oxford, etc., have demonstrated that psychedelic assisted psychotherapy is orders of magnitude more effective than the most effective treatment for a number of, and almost every single pathology for mental health. That's from PTSD to treatment-resistant depression, et cetera, right? So it is, at a mental level, it's clearly demonstrated by science to be highly effective. At a physical level, in the last 20 years or so, science and psychology has demonstrated this extraordinary mind-body connection, that when we are quote unquote unhealthy in the mind, in areas of stress, high levels of anxiety, fear, etc., our body also keeps the score. There's a very famous book now called The Body Keeps the Score about this. And so ailments of the mind will actually manifest as disease or um, you know, ailments in the body. And so there's tremendous physical healing available here too. Okay, we've had a number of people that have suffered from decades of chronic pain, or in and out of the hospital for issues, and then after our retreat, gone. Just they were able to have a relief from their physical ailments that they had never thought possible, because they just had, surrendered to living with it. Third, spiritual health. Um, in the context of entrepreneurs, one might ask, like, why is spirituality important, right? Like, how does that make me a better founder, and how does that make me a better human? And we often get people that have some level of trauma or self-prescribed trauma from religion. Like, they were raised in a church environment that was really punitive or made them feel guilty, etc. Right? We have a co-facilitator who is one of the top psychologists in the world. But what's very interesting is he was also, before a psychologist, he was a Catholic priest for 20 years and then became a Zen monk. And he used to run UN refugee programs in Africa as a priest. So very decorated individual, both from a spiritual and a mental health perspective. And he shares that you can sit with a psychotherapist for decades, but what is truly and deeply healing is spirituality. And that's because when we have it concrete in our being that things happen for a reason, there's a connectedness to everybody, to everything, that that just the very nature of living and experiencing we can feel grateful for. It allows us to meet any of life's challenges, right? Anything, like a parent passing, for example. Like, we can meet that with grace instead of resisting it and saying, oh, whoa, why me? Why this? Why that? Right? So the spirituality is so deeply impactful. And then finally, relational. Ultimately, everybody seeks connection, right? And one of the biggest wounds that any human has is that of abandonment. When we feel connected with ourselves, that enables us to feel connected with others, period. Right? When we seek out connection from others to fill the void in ourselves, that's when we continue to engage and run in the hamster wheel of going from partner to partner, not understanding why it doesn't work. Right?
So it's like I haven't resourced myself. If I'm not resourced, if I don't feel like I have everything that I need, I'm looking for that externally, and therefore I'm seeking and searching and grabbing and grasping at stuff, trying to fill a hole, as opposed to saying, oh, actually, I can do this myself.
Right. The greatest love one must have is love of oneself, right? And that enables us to love others and love God and love the universe more purely, right? So you originally asked the question, like, why do this in an environment with support, with professional support, with structure, etc.? First, I just wanted to demonstrate the extraordinary importance of what can be shifted at those 4 levels, right?
Yeah.
And then, in a context like what we provide, we are facilitating at 3 levels: the neuroscience, the psychology, and the spirituality, right? And so we, there's physical safety, contraindications, medical safety, the safety of the environment, etc., right? So, and we provide supplements for brain regeneration. So there's lots of, like, the neuroscientific and biochemical side that we incorporate into this. It also helps people feel more safe when they understand the science behind it, right? Because that's, especially in the modern world, like, the dimension we look through to make sure we feel medically safe. The psychology, we incorporate the most advanced techniques in psychotherapy and psychospirituality. In fact, we have advisors coming from some of the top universities like Yale and Harvard as part of our organization. And what that does is it gives us the tools, the process by which we can be aware of, surface, and hold our own emotions, stories, and beliefs, right? You can only change what you're aware of because, well, I mean, it's quite obvious. And so having the tools and practicing the tools before the actual psychedelic leads us to be able to go in the psychedelic with the number one source of safety, and that's self-empowerment, right? I feel self-empowered to be with myself, whatever comes up, even the things that might surprise me, and it often does. And if you just zoom out and look at that, the value of that and going back to life, life is going to constantly challenge you, no matter
Mm-hmm.
what,
Yeah.
right? And now you get to also have the experience of self-empowerment to be with the things that come through life, right? Yeah,
Yeah. The what I am reflecting on is your statement about how powerful this can be as a transformation. And if someone just goes out and they're like, hey, I'm just going to go do some whatever, some psychedelic mushrooms, whatever it is, in a purely recreational state, I'm not being introspective. I'm not really doing the deep work. I've got a lot of external stimuli. Even if I then say, well, I'm going to do it in a more enhanced way, so I'm going to be in my house or on my couch or whatever it is, and I'm gonna close the curtains and make this a more inward experience. I'm not benefiting from the support or the friendships that are there, the relationships that are there. I don't necessarily have all the tools there that are going to support me. So it's really, in my mind, it's like different levels of impact, and the more that we can do, the greater the impact. And this goes back to what you're saying about entrepreneurs. So we want to have maximum impact in the shortest amount of time, right? Which is like, we're all wired for that. And so that's like such a compelling part of this, is to say,
totally.
the way I think about it is like, hey, are you just like going off because you want to have a nice evening, or do you really want to change your life? And if you
I
want to
just
change
came
your
up
life,
with
like, this is the way. Go ahead.
I just came up with a great metaphor as you were talking about listening to music and stuff. So imagine the difference between listening to music while you're working, right? Lots of external stimuli, right? Lying down on the couch and listening to music, like your favorite song, and that how good that might feel, right? To being in a concert room with a couple hundred people listening to live music, significantly different experience, right? And then imagine your favorite band playing just for you and your closest friends in a living room,
Right.
and then what that would be like. All right, like this is so it's an easy way to kind of like um visualize and maybe feel the difference in quality of what's possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like that band also giving you workshops beforehand, like so significant difference between taking it yourself and playing versus like I'm going to intentionally be here and have this intimate experience with others and with myself.
And what are the tricks to making this stick? I think everyone can understand that if I take a dose of psychedelics, that I'm going to have a personal experience of some kind. But how do I turn that into not just a memory of like, oh, that was great? Like, how do I actually then incorporate this into my day to day going forward?
Totally. And it's I think the same answer for anything, which is practice, right? um, and that's something that we do through the workshops. We practice this new way of being that we feel, and practice getting triggered, and then practice responding instead of reacting. um, the second is support. Like if anybody here has been in a coaching container, accountability and support is extraordinarily important, right? The mission statement of Ceremonia is to accelerate spiritual connection in community for the psychedelically curious. And that community portion is so important. Most of our wounds happen in relationship to our
Mm.
parents, in relationship to our siblings, in relationship to people that we grew up with, right? Healing also has to be in relationship. And so when we have support from others that become our chosen family here, healing is so much easier. The third is same thing that would go for any kind of self-improvement, ritual and routine, right? Like having proactive and reactive rituals to help support us. So proactive meaning like I'm going to wake up, I'm going to start with meditation before my morning coffee, I'm going to journal, I'm going to move my body a little bit, etc. Right? I budget 2 hours of my morning ritual every day.
Wow.
And then reactive is like, okay, if I get triggered, my reactive ritual is I'm going to take 3 deep breaths, right? I'm going to ask for a moment, a pause, and then I'm going to re-engage. It's like a reactive ritual, right? So I'd say having those is extraordinarily important. And then the fourth thing is a lot of stuff that come from our psychotherapeutic or psychospiritual frameworks. One thing that we do in our integration process that really speaks to founders is codifying values, right? So most most successful companies, I would say all successful companies, have codified their set of values into their culture, right? And as founders listening to this, you've probably spent a lot of energy making sure those values are really stick, and that helps even as the founders leave the company or pass away, like in the case of Apple, those values are what end up guiding the organization. We do that for us personally and also for relationships, creating personal values that guide us, that orient us when we have question marks in our mind. So yeah, these are the practices that we like to share to help it really, really stick.
I want to focus on one keyword there, which is healing, and I want to share a personal story and reflection on that, which is that I have, and I guess I could put this in the past tense, I had a lot of resistance to the idea that I need healing or needed healing. Why? Because I would look at my life and I would say, I didn't have any major trauma with a capital T in my life, right? I didn't have anything that was like very obviously gone terrible in my life. I am someone who is healthy. I've been able to create my own life. I've done a lot of things. I've had, tremendous amount of uh, support throughout my life and tremendous number of advantages in my life as well. And being able to reflect and say, well, hey, there's still things in me that need healing. Like that word used to really set me off, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'd be like, no, I'm okay. And sort of a typical, probably male reaction to that, or certainly entrepreneur reaction. No, I'm fine. I'm okay. I can deal with this myself. And recognizing that even though, yes, I've been able to create a great life and I've got all these advantages and benefits and so on, I still had areas that needed healing that I needed to tap into was for me like a really important mindset. And
Mm.
it gave me permission to relax around certain things. It gave me permission to view them with a different angle. And I've heard you talk about what you call inner healing intelligence and just kind of using, kind of going with that flow a little bit. And I just wanted to share that for me, like there was a lot of resistance around that. And I would think about it as like, well, no, I don't really need healing. I'm just doing this for an experience or for some insights or for some clarity or for some new idea. And in reality, it was healing that I was after.
Mm. Yeah, what I'm hearing is that um, a lot of people come in for various different reasons. Some people come in for healing, for trauma, like we've taken people with PTSD and treatment-resistant depression, etc. But we also have a lot of high-performing founders, right? Silicon Valley unicorn founders, major blockchain founders, and um, board members of Fortune 500s, and they don't typically come in for quote unquote healing. They typically come in for performance enhancement, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, healing is just a word, like God or divinity is a word, right? Trying to convey something. And the way I like to think of it is if you're not in a persistent state of Buddha, right? Like like infinite peace and joy and like everybody wants to love you and you just outpour love, right? Then there is some level of healing or awakening that inside of you, right? And we like to call this non-resistance, or aka surrender, um, in more sort of woo-woo or nouveau terms. Uh, Resistance can be something as simple as um, not accepting reality as is, right? So somebody cuts me off in traffic, and I'm like, damn, well, I just resisted that reality is that, right? That I just got cut off in traffic. I can't change that. I can't go back in time and change it. So this resistance is causing me suffering. And Buddha said, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. So when we do healing, we get into greater levels of acceptance and non resistance, which unlocks greater levels of self love and connection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is what I've experienced myself. I want to shift a little bit and talk about some of the support tools that I know you value and that you put around the work. The one that's coming to mind for me is IFS, or internal family systems. Um,
Mm.
I'm not sure that everyone in their mind would necessarily link a psychology tool or a personal tool like IFS to psychedelic work and how that could improve their lives. Tell me about that link, or what made you decide that you wanted to incorporate IFS into everything at Ceremonia.
Yeah. Um, so when I used to think of psychotherapy, I would think of like sitting in a shrink's office on a couch, talking about my past, and then that person taking notes, right? And maybe
Yeah,
falling asleep.
kind of the
So it's
the
like
classic
classic what you
person
see
on
on TV.
couch, Freudian. Yeah,
Totally. Yeah. Um, we're in what's called the third wave of psychology, right? The first wave was Pavlov. I ring a bell, ring a bell, dog salivates, right? Um, the second is was cognitive behavioral therapy, right? CBT, which is the thought that um, my thoughts influence my emotions, right? So like I can say mantras or speak into a mirror affirmations, and then I can then feel better and go manifest things. This third wave is a much more integrated model, and it begins with mindfulness, right? We shared, I shared earlier, you can only change what you're aware of. So enhancing your mindfulness of your emotions, your stories, your beliefs allows you to tune in and be able to have the foundation to change that thing, right? To shift that thing inside of you. And this third wave, which includes Gestalt therapy, internal family systems, various protocols that we incorporate, um, is really about being in the present moment, right? One of our teachers that we like, called David Hawkins, who owned the largest psychiatry practice in the US before, he shares that the present moment is all that exists, that the only thing that is true. The future doesn't exist yet, the past already happened, right? And so everything in the past, we also experience now. You know, if I had a lot of grief or trauma in the past, well, the way that I experience that is now in this current moment in my body, like a sensation or whatnot. So these this these modern psychotherapeutic models enable us to be more present with what is. And what's so interesting is that very statement, like being present with what is. I just spoke about non-resistance to reality. It's effectively that, right? Being present with whatever I'm feeling right now, whatever I am experiencing right now, I allow it and I give it space. Versus what is typically the default programming that people have is that if I experience fear, if I experience anger, if I experience shame or guilt, I want to push that away.
hmm
So I'll stuff it down. I'll pull up Instagram and start surfing. I'll take a drink. I'll turn on the TV, or I'll yell at somebody, right, and project it out, right? Suppression, projection, denial, repression. Instead of doing that, what psychotherapy gives us is the tools to be with it and to inquire deeper within. Now, what's really fascinating is this third wave is bridging more and more connections to thousands of years of spiritual tradition. Because in fact, this what you know tapping into the body and feeling the sensations and breathing into it, these are things that are taught in Hinduism and Buddhism and Christianity from many thousands of years ago, just with a different language, and I think with maybe less advanced or less nuanced techniques, right? And so we like to share that the end point of psychology is the beginning of spirituality. And what's really so cool right now, and I think will connect to a lot of left brain people, is that in this third wave that we're in right now, um, in that bridge of psychology to spirituality, everything is proving out as being beneficial and true. Many paths lead to Rome. Where this affects the psychedelic experiences, the depth in which you can go in psychedelics is determined by your feeling of safety, right?
Mhm.
And the most important aspect of safety is to feel safe with myself, with my own emotions that come up, right? With my own visions that come up. So the tools help teach us the process to be able to do that and meet ourselves with greater capacity.
So internal family systems, I'm seeing, so you're much more fluent at talking about this than I am, but it has to do with the fact that there's probably multiple parts within me that are reacting to what's happening now or what might have happened in the past. And there's certain patterns that form around those. And so what you're saying is that familiarizing myself with those kind of tools makes me more equipped to go into a psychedelic session, knowing that I have those to help me and that I've used those to explore where I am.
Yes, 100%. Because the alternative, which is comes from the shamanistic tradition, is mysticism, right? It's to say, um, hey, it's spirit or the medicine or something that is healing you, right? And in a sense, like that could be helpful because you're like, oh, if there's something mystical out there, then I can relax a little bit in here, knowing that I'm being held. But the problem with that is subtly and also powerfully disempowering, right? Because what ends up happening is it entrains your mind to believe that something out there is healing or affecting me something in here. It's the flip side of the coin of victimhood, right? In victimhood, I'm saying something out there is perpetrating and making me feel sad, fearful, angry in here, right? Versus taking responsibility of I am my own healer. I am the medicine, right? And so the tools of psychotherapy enable us to really recognize and be with these experiences that and feelings that we've suppressed for so long. It gives us those tools of self inquiry and being with. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I think, you know, I haven't looked at the website in a while, but presumably one of the 7 tenets of Ceremonia is I am the healer.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's,
Um,
yeah.
so I just want to go back to psychedelics for a moment and then wrap up. But if I'm curious about this journey and I'm someone saying, hey, you know what, I want to learn more about these tools. This is interesting. It sounds meaningful. Sounds like it could help me in my life. Today, there are so many options, right? I mean, just off the top of my head, if I'm thinking psychedelics, there's mushrooms, there's LSD, MDMA, ayahuasca, iboga, 5-MeO DMT, ketamine, lots of other things I don't even know about. What are your thoughts? What are your insights on where should someone start? What is the right on ramp, or what questions should they be asking to help answer that?
There are many dimensions here, right? And I think the most important one is, particularly in the United States, is first to look at legality, right? Ketamine is the only federally legal psychedelic that was the FDA legalized in 2019. MDMA is set to be legalized next year in 2024. And then psilocybin is expected legalization federally in 2025. But for pathologies like treatment resistant depression and PTSD, in Colorado, at a state level, psilocybin and DMT, which is active molecule psychotropic compound for ayahuasca, is decriminalized and set to be licensable and medically utilized, kind of like cannabis was first, starting next year. So, and then of course we serve it as a sacrament as a church, and so we're serving it legally, as well as likely to be a licensed center very early on in Colorado. So both the state level and a federal level protection.
Cool.
With that said, I I think that you have to feel comfortable with the setting that you are taking this in. That's so important, because if you don't feel especially intuitively safe, that is going to diminish the safety you'll feel under the psychedelic, which can then really can cause harm to you mentally, physically, spiritually. Okay. Second, insofar as the medicine, I actually asked Rick Doblin, who's the founder of MAPS and was an early advisor to us, this question, like, you've done so much research on these psychedelics, which one is better or worse? And he says that it's not so much the psychedelic, or the substance. It's much more the environment and the duration of the psychedelic that is important, right?
Okay.
Because the longer you're under that medicine, the longer you have to penetrate into deeper levels of your being. We like to lead, with psilocybin. Psilocybin is one of our sacraments, because it is so well known, so studied, and has been around for so long, for hundreds of thousands of years, and probably predates humanity, which to me lends a quality of safety to people coming and taking this that is just culturally impossible to get with something like ayahuasca or LSD or etc. Right? And so even if the vast majority of people that come to us haven't used a psychedelic or haven't, and especially haven't been in a intentional ceremonial or therapeutic setting with it, that the penetration of psilocybin into popular culture and media, like you go on Netflix and watch How to Change Your Mind and documentaries on that, contains inherent in it a sense of safety, right? So I would personally advocate starting with that. And then third, as I shared with you earlier, like I think it's absolutely essential to surround this work with proper preparation and integration that is informed by really well-trained individuals coming from, at a minimum, some training in psychotherapy and harm reduction, right? Trauma-informed harm reduction, because don't know what's going to come up. And then ideally some training in the psychospiritual work of how we can maximize and effectively integrate this work into our 3D real lives, right? So I think those are the three most important aspects to really consider at the onset.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And this is important because a lot of people are going to be looking for where to start, and they're gonna hear this, and they're gonna appreciate the guidance that you're providing there on, especially on how to keep it safe and how to make it as effective and manageable as possible. As we wrap up here, Austin, I want to get into a couple questions. Now, you were a pivotal part of our second annual Conscious Entrepreneur Summit in June of 2023 in Boulder. You led an eye-gazing exercise, which really opened up the energy of the room on day one. And then on day two, you shared your personal journey. You shared what you're doing at Ceremonia. You then introduced Keith Ferrazzi, who was one of our keynotes. And so it's been such an honor to have you as a part of the Conscious Entrepreneur community. What I'd like to get your input on is, you've been around this community, you've been an entrepreneur yourself for many, many years. What's your definition of a conscious entrepreneur?
I believe that the very nature of being an entrepreneur contains within it a responsibility, right? With great power comes great responsibility. We are projecting out our ideas, our energy into the world in a way that where we seek to create maximum impact and influence. So, in my definition of a conscious entrepreneur, it's someone who does that in pursuit of truth, right? In pursuit of what feels real and good and kind, compassionate and true to them. And I shared that one of the foundational beliefs of Ceremonia is truth is subjective, and it's also objective. And when it's objective, it feels like unconditional love. It feels like peace. It feels like connection and harmony between all beings and all things with nature. And so to me, a conscious entrepreneur, we have the opportunity to be representatives of that truth, to enroll other people into the feeling of the truth in themselves, right? by modeling that we are being true to ourselves.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Share with us your daily practice. So you mentioned you block out 2 hours for development work in the morning, your personal development work. But what goes into your day? So what are you doing around mindfulness or meditation or exercise or nature or therapy? Like what are you doing to support yourself?
Cool. And this is also shared in our program. So first of all, I friends with some of the top biohackers in the world, like Dave Asprey, and we integrate that into our program now. So every morning, wake up, I do a meditation and share gratitude internally, or just even just waking up, you know. Then cold plunge,
Ah,
which it's
yes.
getting real cold right now. I think our first snow is tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So it's extra challenging now, but it's so valuable to begin your day with conquering a challenge, and feeling into the body. Then I do a steam room, so contrast therapy. And then I do journaling and a journaling practice. And then I chart out my to-dos for the day. And then I actually calendar and block off my calendar in 15 to 30-minute increments of the things that I'm doing for the day. For every meal, and then I do yoga or workout, right? Lift weights or yoga. Every meal, I express gratitude. And then when I close my evenings, instead of TV, I play music, I write, I read, and then before sleep, I meditate. And I actually do an internal IFS meditation on myself, internal family systems meditation on myself.
Wow, fantastic.
So,
Any journal prompts you particularly recommend?
Yeah, so much of our work is about being present. And so I like to start with, in this moment, I am. Instead of just going into story of the past or the future, but like in this moment, I am noticing, I am feeling, I am aware of. And that practice alone helps me, and I think helps everybody become more present.
Cool. And then lastly, what are the resources that you most like to share, particularly with entrepreneurs? I'm thinking the books you most reference and give away, or videos or courses or other things that you'd like to share with folks.
Beautiful. So first, we have an online course that we're launching this coming week that'll be free.
Cool.
A 4-week online course called Open, and it's called An Introduction to Accelerated Self-Healing. And so that goes into mindfulness, somatic experiencing, some of the psychotherapeutic techniques, and then ultimately how to choose and work with psychedelics safely. So that'll be on our website at ceremoniacircle.org. Secondly, the books. So every entrepreneur is also human. And the book that we have people read before coming to our journeys is Letting Go by David Hawkins.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful book.
Mm-hmm.
Hawkins is a prolific writer, translated over 35 languages. Highly recommend it.
Yep.
And it's literally the Bible for our church. And then specifically for entrepreneurs, it's actually part of our integration program of our journeys, is The Second Mountain by David Brooks. Beautiful book. The analogy is that the metaphor is that the first mountain is the outer work, career, family, prestige, etc. The second mountain is that after we climb the first mountain and finding that we are not experiencing the level of joy that we think we can, is the inner work, spirituality and commitments and values and relationships and community. So, and I think that can speak to a lot of founders that want to translate success to fulfillment.
Super. Thank you for sharing those. I didn't know that there was a new course coming out from Ceremonia, so that sounds really, really valuable. Well, hey, Austin Mao, I want to thank you for being here, but more importantly, I want to thank you for the incredible work that you are doing to bring love and consciousness and healing into the world. I can say, based on my experience, that what you're doing is really transformative. It is super valuable, and it's an honor for me to consider you a friend. And thanks for joining us here to share on the Conscious Entrepreneur Podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.